In this video, you will learn how to complete your solve and critique projects. These projects consist of two parts, solve and critique. For the solve portion, you will have to solve one problem from the solve problem set posted on the project description page on OWL. To determine which problem you will complete, the number of the problem corresponds to the last digit of your student number. The problems are also split up by type. There are three types of problems: true or false, identify and correct the error, and find another way. The types of questions for both the solve and critique portions of the assignment are the same. So it is important to understand all the different types of questions because for the critique part, you will grade all three types of problems. Now we will go through the instructions for the three different types of problems. First, there is true or false. You will be given a statement and you have to decide whether the statement is true or false. If it is true, you have to give a short explanation as to why it is true with specific reference to content from the book. If the statement is false, you have to provide a clear, explicit counterexample to the statement and be sure to explain why it is a valid counterexample. The second type of problem is identify and correct the error. You will be given a question and a solution, and you have to find and correct any errors in the given solution. After you have identified the errors, be sure to justify with specific reference to the book why each error is in fact an error. The last type of problem is find another way. You will be given both a question and one way to solve the question. As a student, you have to find another way to solve the same problem. You must make sure that this second way is significantly different from the original way. The second half of this project is the critique portion. For this portion, open the critique problem set posted on the project description page on OWL. You will notice that there are three problems with three bad solutions. Your task as the teacher is to grade these bad solutions based on their mistakes, clarity of presentation, and for the find another way question, to analyze whether the alternative way has any drawbacks or benefits compared to the original way. First, you have to critique the bad solution based on mistakes by answering the following questions. Are there any mistakes? What are they? Why are they mistakes? Then, you have to answer which mistakes are critical. That is, they exhibit a misunderstanding on the part of the solution writer. For each such mistake, you have to answer why it likely exhibits a misunderstanding, and what is that specific misunderstanding. Next, you must critique the bad solution based on clarity of presentation by answering the questions, what parts of the argument were clearest to you? What about them made them clear to you? If nothing was clear to you, say so. What parts of the argument, if any, were confusing to you? What confused you about them? If nothing was confusing to you, what parts of the argument do you think could be the most confusing to others? What about them could be confusing? This last question should only be answered if nothing was confusing to you. Lastly, in addition to critiquing mistakes and clarity, for the find another way question, you also have to answer the questions, what are some benefits and/or drawbacks, if any, for using the alternative way? And what are some benefits and/or drawbacks, if any, for using the original way? Now that we have gone through the instructions, let's try to do some critiques. Please note that the answers given here may not be complete or perfect answers. The sample critiques are only being used to explain how to properly complete this part of the assignment. All these questions are from the first solve and critique assignment. First, let's do an example of a true or false critique. The statement says, if the rank of a 4x3 matrix A is 3, then the equation AX equals 0 must have infinitely many solutions. Under bad solution, it says true, because if we take the matrix A, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, the matrix has a free variable, so the equation has infinitely many solutions. Now we can start the sample critique by answering the questions regarding any mistakes. Note that for your critique, you don't have to write the questions and answers individually. You can include all of your responses in paragraph form without referring to the specific questions. Just make sure you answer all the relevant questions in complete sentences. For the mistakes, the first question is, are there any mistakes? What are they? Why are they mistakes? A sample response could be that the bad solution has mathematical mistakes. First, if the statement is true, it must be proven in general for any 4x3 matrix with rank 3. Second, the example matrix A given isn't 4x3, and it does not even have rank 3. Also, the statement is actually false, so not only is the proof incorrect, the statement of it being true is incorrect as well. The second question under mistakes says, which mistakes are critical? For each such mistake, why does it likely exhibit a misunderstanding? What is that misunderstanding? A sample response could be, the mistakes of trying to prove a general statement with a specific example, not using the correct dimensions of the matrix, and not using a matrix with the correct rank are all critical mistakes. These mistakes exhibit a misunderstanding of the concepts of matrices, rank, and what it means to prove a mathematical statement. The matrix given was 4x2 and not 4x3, and the rank of the given matrix was 1 and not 3. Also, for an arbitrary 4x3 matrix A, if the rank is 3, then after row reduction, the reduced row echelon form of A will look like this. So in fact, there will be a unique solution to AX equals 0. The next area for critique is clarity of presentation. The first question states, what part of the argument were clearest to you? What about them made them clear to you? If nothing was clear to you, say so. A sample response could say, the clearest part of the argument was when the student inferred that since the matrix they chose had a free variable, then the system AX equals 0 has infinitely many solutions. This was a correct implication and this was clear. The second question says, what parts of the argument, if any, were confusing to you? What confused you about them? A sample response could say, what was confusing to me was the fact that the student used a matrix that is 4x2 to try to prove something about a 4x3 matrix. It was also confusing that they tried to use a specific counterexample to prove a general statement. They also used a rank 1 matrix regarding a question that referred to a rank 3 matrix. They didn't state how their proof indeed proved that the statement is true for all matrices of that size. The last question in this section is, if nothing was confusing to you, what parts of the argument do you think could be most confusing to others? What about them could be confusing? This question is not relevant to me because in the sample critique, we did identify parts in the bad solution that were confusing. Note that if you did find some parts confusing, you do not need to answer this question. Let's try another critique example. This time, the question is of the form of identifying and correcting the error. The question states, describe geometrically the span of the vectors 2, 5, -3, and -1/15, -1/6, 1/10 in R3. The statement of the question continues with a solution. The span of these two vectors consists of all the linear combinations of them, that is, A times the first vector plus B times the second vector for scalars A and B. We have that two vectors and two direction vectors span a plane. So the span of these two vectors is a plane with the following parametric equation. The bad solution that we must critique says the following. The mistake is that we did not check if the vectors are linearly independent. They are not, so the span of these two vectors is a line. Again, to critique this, we start with the mistakes. The first question asks if there are any mistakes. Our response could say that no, there are no mathematical mistakes in this solution. In fact, the vectors are linearly dependent. If we label the first vector by v and the second vector by w, then actually v equals -30 times w. So they are linearly dependent, hence they span a line. We note that the rest of the questions in the mistakes portion are no longer relevant, since we said that this solution did not have any mistakes. Moving on to clarity of the presentation, we have to answer the question about what was clearest to us. A sample response could be that the clearest part of the argument was the implication that if the vectors are linearly dependent, then they span a line. Although this was lacking in more detail, the statement itself was clear. The next question is about the parts that were most confusing. A sample response could say that the most confusing part of this solution was that the student did not specify how the vectors were linearly dependent. That is, that v equals -30 times w. Also, some more justification is needed as to why two linearly dependent vectors in R3 must span a line. Again, we do not have to answer the last question because we did find something in the solution that was confusing. The find another way critique goes in the same way. Answer the questions about mistakes and clarity of presentation and the following additional questions. What are some benefits and or drawbacks, if any, for using the alternative way? What are some benefits and or drawbacks, if any, for using the original way? Once you have finished both your solved problem and the critiques of the 3 given bad solutions, your assignment is complete. The 3 key takeaways are the following. Solve the question on the solved problem set that corresponds to the last digit of your student number, and clearly indicate which problem you are solving on your submission. Next, critique all 3 bad solutions on the critique problem set. And for the critique, make sure you answer all of the relevant questions outlined in the critique instructions on the project description page. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any further questions, be sure to ask them on the corresponding forum.